Once you've downloaded your Emmeline bag pattern for the retreat bag, you'll want to prepare the following. You will want to have a Emmeline bag frame. This is the A size because the one I'm demonstrating today is for the small retreat bag. The Emmeline bag frames, I buy mine from the Little Craft Shed in the UK, and the link for their website will be in the comments below. You'll also want some matching thread for your top fabric and your bottom fabric because you will be doing some top stitching. Your fabric for the external fabric pieces, you will want to cut 2 of these which measure 13.5 by 9 inches tall, and you'll want 2 of those. You will also want to cut out the same size, 13.5 by 9, 2 of your lining fabrics. You'll also cut out 2 8 by 8 squares of your lining fabric. These are going to be for the inside pockets. We will be making them to fold over in half. So if you have got directional fabric, you'll want to cut 4 strips and then join them along one edge. Again, there'll be an additional video at the end to explain about directional and non-directional fabric. You'll want to cut yourself 2 zipper tabs. These I've cut 3 inches tall by 2 inches wide, and again you want 2 of those. You'll also want a 16-inch zip. The 16-inch zip can be off the roll, or it can be one where we've cut the ends off, and I'll explain why we do that later in the videos. But again, if you've got a 22-inch zip or something sort of longer, it's not a problem because we do make the zip size to fit. The other items you want to have cut will be your woven interfacing. If you haven't used this before, there is a smooth side on top, and then underneath there's a rough side, and that's what the glue is. And I'll explain more about that further along in the videos. And then you've got your fleece interfacing. This is obviously what gives it its padding and a bit of oomph. Again, this will be smooth on one side and rough on the other. You can just about make out the sort of marks on it. That's what the glue is, and again that's what we're going to stick to the fabrics. Step 2, attaching the interfacing. In front of me I've got the lining panels, the exterior panels, the pockets, and some woven interfacing. So I'm going to show you how to attach the woven interfacing. The woven interfacing feels like cloth on the top, and just underneath will feel very rough, and that's where the glue is. So you want to kind of flip your fabric over and place your interfacing on top that you've already pre-cut. You don't necessarily have to use a pressing cloth with the woven interfacing, but I would suggest you do iron with a pressing motion. Every iron has a sweet spot, and as you find when you're ironing your fabric, you may notice it takes in some places and not in others. So if you can just about make out, I've got like some bubbles in the fabric there. That's where the interfacing hasn't adhered to the actual back of the fabric. So I'm just going to go over that. So again, a pressing motion with a slight ironing, because sometimes when you're ironing your fabric, it can stretch and distort. So what I'm trying to prevent by using a pressing motion is to stop the stretching of both of those fabrics so that it still keeps its dimensions. Just double check. Yep, I've still got a little bit of a bubble there. Can you see how it's not quite stuck on? What I want to do is make sure it's all adhered. This will really help when it comes to assembling the bag. So keep going round. As you can see from me ironing, some will take quicker than others. Yep, I think that's just about it. So iron the interface to all of your fabric panels. That's your 2 outside panels and your 2 inside fabric panels, as well as your square pieces of fabric. Once you've done that, come back to me for the next video and I'll show you how to interface fleece. The part of this video is about attaching the fusible fleece to your already prepared outer fabric that's already been reinforced with some woven interface. So you'll want to place your fusible fleece rough side down. Now the rough is what is the glue, and the fluffy side at the top will actually stick to your iron if you put your iron directly. So you will need a pressing cloth. I've just used an old pillow sheet or some polyester cotton, anything that can really take the heat. Now with fusible fleece, it is a bit of a monkey to try and get it to adhere. So you do have to hold your iron in place for a good 5 to 8 seconds. I often get this in class where people say it's not sticking, it's not working. And sometimes you might have to give it a shot of steam just to kind of get that heat to penetrate through the fabrics. I'll just check. Yep, it's great. It's not stuck, which is what I love, because this happens in class all the time. So I'm just going to give it a shot of steam. I'll put my steam back up. I don't like to use steam very often because it can shrink some fabrics. So I'm quite cautious on using it. And plus, when you're using it, it doesn't bode well for filming, because no doubt my camera's about to fill steam up. And I'm glad I've used a pressing cloth because some grime has squirted itself out of the iron. So let's just check. Yep, I can see that's stuck. I cannot lift it at all. So carry on going for the rest. But as you can see, because I've used steam, it's actually just slightly gone smaller there. This hasn't stuck down and it's bigger. So do bear that in mind. If you are using a steam shotting like I just did there, it potentially will shrink the fabric and then pull it in. It's not a problem because we can overcome that when we put the bag together, but it is something to watch out for. So carry on fusing your fusible fleece to both the exterior panels of your bag, not the lining, just the exterior. This next part of the video is explaining sort of making the marks on the fabric, which become really useful for the next stage of the sewing. You'll want to make a mark at the top of each of your external fabric pieces, a 1-inch marking, just a 1/4 of an inch down, but you'll want to do that on both sides of your fabric. Oh, didn't make it, there we go. On the bottom of your external fabric, now you really want to make sure you've got your fabric right side up and you've got whichever detail you want at the top, because when we flip it over, we're going to mark and cut a 2-inch square at the bottom of each corner. And these will help when we come to box the makeup bag later into a shape that sits nicely on a table. You'll want to do that for both external fabric pieces. And I would also suggest marking the 1-inch mark on the top of your internal fabric pieces, and you'll also want to cut a 2-inch square from each of your bottom corners. Now that you've cut your corners out, your fabric pieces should look like this. You'll have your directional fabric we design at the top, you've got your 2-inch squares cut out, and on the back you've got your 1-inch marks on either side cut, and you'll have done that for all 4 fabric pieces, your 2 lining and your 2 outer pieces. We're now going to move on to the zip. You're going to want a zip that is exactly 16 inches long, and we're going to create a zipper tab. Now if you're using a zip that's from a roll, you won't have any metal ends. If you have got a zip that's longer than this, obviously you'll want to cut off these metal points at both ends, because they will get in the way and potentially damage your machine when you come to sew the tabs on the end. So if you are using a ready-made zip, make sure you cut those metal tabs off. The zip I've got here, I've already measured out, is 16 inches long, but I'm going to create a zipper tab like this one. Now to make that, you're going to take your 3 by 2 inch rectangle that you've already cut from your external fabric or your lining fabric, as in this case here. You want your 3 inch at the top and the 2 inches here, and you're going to fold and then iron and press 1/2 inch of those side seams in, like so. You're then going to want to flip it around and iron in and press again those 2 edges there. And as you can see, the fabric's fighting against because I don't have an iron. So here's one I kind of made earlier in good old Blue Peter style. So again, just to show you, once they're all folded in and pressed, you should have a little pocket that looks just like this. You're going to take that and a little zipper tab and insert this raw end. You're going to open up those 2 folded edges to insert your zip just about sort of where that center crease mark is, and fold that over. You're then going to fold that over in. As you can see, if you've pressed beforehand, it really will help to get those raw edges tucked in. You're going to take a couple of clips, making sure your raw edges are tucked in side. And if you kind of find the poking out, you can always help to put them in under the sewing machine by using some tweezers or a pair of scissors to keep them down. So what you're going to do next is create one for the opposite end in exactly the same fashion. If you find you're struggling to insert this one because it keeps wanting to open, just give it a couple of backing stitches or sort of clip it in place, so that when you do come to kind of put it on, it hopefully will stay in place. But I tend to just give it a quick run over the machine or a couple of hand stitches to keep it in place. This video will show you how to create the pockets that go inside your retreat bag. You want to take one of your pocket panels, your 8x8 squares, and fold it in half. Once you fold it in half, you're going to sew down, get them together, down one side at about 1/4 inch with a little bit of a back stitch. 1/4 inch down one side, and just as you get towards the bottom, keep your needle down so that when you come to turn the corner, you can get a nice crisp corner as we go around. The only reason I haven't got interfacing right to the edge is because I actually ran out, so I'm just using sort of interfacing that I've got in, and I already know that when I come to turn it, that won't be seen and it won't make any difference to it. So again, you know, there is wiggle room in creating these. So once you want to go about 1 inch or 2 in, and then with a little bit of a back tack, and then you kind of want to cut that off. Mine's got a cutting motion, or you just pull it out with a pair of scissors. You're going to leave a gap of about 2 inches, and that's what we're going to use to turn it. Again, down we go, bit of a back stitch, and then keeping at that 1/4 inch seam. When we come to the corner, keep your needle down, lift your foot up, and back up the other side. A couple of back stitches to secure that. And then we're going to put that one to one side. This next video, I'm going to be showing you how to attach the zipper tabs that we mentioned earlier. I'm just going to quickly run over the end of this to stop them kind of coming apart. So it just makes it easier for when we come to attach the zipper tabs shortly. Just a couple of stitches, doesn't take many. It'll just stop it from coming apart. You're going to take one of your tabs that you made earlier, fold open those sides and insert your zip to about the halfway mark, fold those edges over, and then sandwich it close. You can see my fabric's wanting to come apart. There we go. Use a clip either side. I prefer using clips than pins. I always end up pricking myself on a pin and bleeding on my fabric, and also clips just seem to distort the fabric less. I can see there the fabric's trying to peek out, so when I come to sew that, I'm just going to use something to kind of poke it under so that I have a bit, so it's a bit of a keep it out the way. There we go. when I normally top stitch, I do like to kind of have a longer stitch length. I usually increase it to about a 3 or a 4, depending on the thickness of the fabric. So we're just going to go down one side. Again, needle down for turning. As you can see, that fabric's trying to poke itself out. So I'm just going to hold it in place with something long and sharp. It's better than my fingernails. I'm going to hold it down as it comes up to there. There we go. Turn the corner. And because I've sewn those two together, those zipper ends, it's just helped it from trying to come apart. Again, I'm going to hold that down with my seam ripper or the end of a pair of scissors, or, you know, sort of some tweezers, whatever you've got handy really. And back across this side, as close as the edge as you can feel comfortable, and then back down the other side. I'm going to do it once more because I want those zipper tabs to stay on and not come off, because I am quite rough when I'm using bags. So I'm just going to go quickly back up the other side, following the same stitches I did before. Oh, I can just see I've not quite reached that line. I'm just going to hand crank it onto it because I like it to kind of follow the same stitch line. There we go. Again, back up the other side. Across the top. Now, if you are finding your machine starting to grumble because you are going over thick fabric, hand crank it just to get it in position and take your time going over it. There are alternative ways to make zipper tabs, and I will be showing you them on additional videos. A couple of backpacks. Once I've cut those ends off, you can see just about, it's not great light unfortunately, a zipper tab to hold it in place. The next part of the video, I'm going to demonstrate how to attach the pockets that you will have made. So you'll have your pocket at the moment sort of stitched around the edges with at least a 2 to 3 inches gap. You'll need to clip those corners at the bottom and then turn it all right sides out through that hole that you've left. What you'll end up with, once you've turned it all right side out, is a pocket. Move that out of the way so you can see better. A pocket with a little gap in the bottom. Don't worry about that gap because that's going to get sewn up closed when we attach it to the actual lining. Once you've turned it right way out, get yourself a blunt pencil or a chopstick and just poke sort of the corners so that you get a nice crisp point. Once you've done that, give it a good press and run yourself a top stitch just down the top edge of where the fold isn't. You know, they've got the gap at the bottom, it's at the top. You're going to do a top stitch about 1/4 inch from along the top. You're then going to take one of your lining panels and you're going to measure up 3 inches from the bottom. So 3 inches from up the bottom, and the central of it, you can either eyeball it if you're good at eyeballing, but if you want to know where your central mark is, fold your fabric in half and give it a little of a pinch all the way down the center, and you should end up with quite a faint crease, and it's so faint you can't actually see it on here, but you kind of get the meaning behind it. So I'm going to place this pocket 3 inches up from the bottom. I'm going to fold it in half so I can see where the center was, and that is just about centralized on the bag. Use your fabric that you've already got down to help you line it up so it's in line with the dots. It's not kind of skew whiffy, it's just lined up. Now once you've placed that onto the center of your lining panel, you're going to top stitch across the entire width down, length across, and this will close that seam that we've left open, and then up along the other side. You won't be going across the top because that's where your gap is. And if I show you on the one that I've just created. So as you can see from this one, it was 3 inches up from the bottom. I've sewn down the right hand side, across the bottom and along the top. I've just about make out. It's about an 1/8 of an inch. And the reason why I've done it that narrow is so that I could close up the bottom of that little pouch that we made. And that'll create a pocket for the inside of your bag. And you'll want to do that on both of the lining panels. The next part of this video, I'm going to demonstrate to you how to attach your zip to your lining and outer fabric. So you'll want one of your lining panels with the pocket already attached, your zip with the zipper tabs already created and sewn on. You can just about make out those, and one of your external fabric pieces. So take one of your lining panels and lay it onto the table with the right side facing up towards you. Then you want to take your zip and find the centre mark. I normally just give mine a bit of a fold and a little bit of a squeeze and find the centre, and then line it up with that central mark, that central crease that you made earlier. And you're going to line your zip along the top edge so that it is flush. And I like to kind of clip mine in place before I move on to putting the next layer of fabric on top. You could also use double-sided sticky tape in between these two, which will prevent it from shifting and stretching. I find the size 5 zip is a lot sort of easier to use than a size 3 in this instant, and doesn't tend to stretch as much, so I haven't got any on this occasion. But you can use double-sided sticky tape just underneath to stop it from moving. Once you've got your zip right side up and your fabric right side up, you're going to take your external fabric, flip it over and lay it right side down. And it's really important that you line up those top 2 corners, your marks that you made earlier, and keep all of these in line. So I'm just going to pinch it between my fingers now so that the zip and the fabric don't shift too much. And I'm going to attach the fabric. I've kept the zip to the left hand side. It all depends on if you're left or right handed, or most makeup bags or kit bags, when you have them, will always have the zip to the left and you pull to the right. So if you have got directional fabric or a design that you want to be at the front, then you'll need to bear that in mind. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to sew from the centre onwards at a 1/4 inch seam allowance down to the bottom. A size 5 zip, you can either use your regular foot and move your needle across, or if you've got a zipper foot, that's even better, because that'll keep you away from the bulk of your zip. So you're going to start from the middle and sew your fabric to that point and then back tack. And then you're going to do the same again on the opposite side, start from the middle all the way down to the bottom and then back tack at that mark that you made previously. The next part of this video demonstration, I'm going to explain why we've left this gap up here. So you'll have taken your fabric sandwich to the sewing machine and stitched down to that point, and also then stitched down on the other side. The reason why we've left that gap and that you've back tacked, back stitched there, is we're going to need to pull that zip down out of the way of the seam. Unfortunately, it's a navy on navy, so it's a bit hard to kind of demonstrate, but I hope you can see what I mean. Is that you're going to kind of pull this down out of the way, and then you're going to kind of sew down that edge. And what I mean by that is, on the other end I've already sewn this end up, is you're going to pull the zip down out of the way and then stitch all the way down and back tack there. And what you'll have is a seam joined, but you'll have the zip out of that seam for the last inch, and that'll become evident why later on in the videos. So make sure you've not kind of sewn that zip in that last 1 inch of the seam, and you've got them nice securely together. Next part of this video's demonstration is putting your other lining and your external fabric onto the zip that you've already sewn to the other 2 panels. So you're going to want to fold this out so that you've got your zip right side up like we did before. So you want to fold all of your fabric, your lining and your exterior, down out of the way. You want your other lining panel with the pocket attached right side up, and exactly the same way you did before, find the centre seam and line it up along the top like so. Once you've lined it up, you then want to kind of clip that back in place. So you should have these 3 fabrics all in a line with each other. Those 3 fabrics are all in a line. It's just a way of checking to make sure everything's straight and you've kind of not attached your panels more to the left or more to the right, but they're actually all going to sit square. So we're going to line them up so it's flush with the top edge of your lining panel. So your zip is right side up, your lining's right side up. You're going to take your other lining panel and flip it over, and you're going to place that right side down. And again, you're going to sandwich it, but making sure those corners are all matched up. And then exactly the same way you did before, you're going to sew at a 1/4 inch from the centre to that line, and from the centre to that line. You're going to pull those zips out the way, and then you're going to sew down that line and then down that line with back tacking again. The next part of this video demonstration, I'm going to be explaining how to assemble the bag. So before we move on to that, you just want to check that you've actually sewn your zipper clear of the edges by at least 1 inch, which you can just about make out from this example here. The next bit's really important. You must open your zipper. If you don't open your zipper, you will struggle to open your bag and end up unpicking. So make sure you open that zipper. The next thing you want to do is take your 2 external panels and place them together, and then your 2 lining panels will naturally fall together. You're then going to want to pin or clip down the sides of your bag as well as the bottom, but you're not going to kind of sew where these corners are. So the only places you're going to be sewing is down the side, across the bottom, but you need to leave a gap of about 2 to 3 inches because we're going to turn the bag through the lining pieces. So you need to leave yourself a 2 to 3 inch gap. You're going to sew down the other side, but not those corners. It's important you do not sew around those corners, and then across the bottom of the exterior of your bag. So make sure that's a full seam. So I'll take this to the sewing machine and I'll come back and show you where I have placed those and sewn those stitch lines. One thing I forgot to mention on the last part of the video is that when you do come to sew this edges, you want to make sure that the zip is tucked inside the bag down the exterior of the fabric, so that when you come to turn it, those zips will naturally pop out the right way. Don't worry if you forget to put it down, you can eventually pull it out, but ideally you want the zip that you've left out the seam to be going down inside the external fabric, and that'll be the one with the fleece on. So what I did, I took it to the sewing machine and I stitched a 1/4 inch down that side, all the straight edges, and making sure I don't sew that zip that I've tucked down out the side. And then the lining fabric I've left about a 2 inch gap, and just so that I can put my hand inside to pull it through, but that's after we've boxed our corners. So your zip should be open and you should have a gap in your panel and your corners ready to box. Now to box your corners, you bring your fabric together and you literally take right sides to right side, match up the seams that you've sewn. You can either place one to the left and the other to the right, or you can open them. I would match them up and clip them in place, and then line the fabric up in a straight line so that you've got a line to follow. I'll just show you that again. So bring your fabric pieces together. Oh, I should have back tacked there, so it's coming apart. So I'll bear that in mind when I come and put the seam together. And what I'll do is I'll just bring that up and fold it to the left, knowing that that seam is about to come undone. So you can either go back on the sewing machine and sew it up, or you can just slightly fold it to the left. And then I'm going to fold that one to the right and clip it before it all comes out. So there's always wiggle room if things don't go quite right. And then again, bring your 2 edges together. I think one of mine is slightly out there, but it won't make too much of a difference. I think I probably cut one at 2 1/4 inch and the other one at 2 inches when I did my box. It happens to the best of us. So again, bring your corners together, but yours, if you have done a nice 2-inch square corner, you won't have those bits bulging out. But if you do, don't worry about it, because we're going to sew it a 1/4 inch and all of that will get hidden within. Carry on to the other corners. Now you can do one or two things. You can either pull back the fleece and trim some of the bulk away, especially if your machine isn't fond of too many fabrics. I would pull that away and give it a trim. However, my machine is pretty robust and it can cope with some thicknesses. So I'm just going to place those two fabrics together, clip the seam in the middle, and then I'm going to sew at a 1/4 inch straight across there. And I'll do the same for the other corner. I'll take that back to the sewing machine, I'll sew my 4 corners, and I'll show you how to birth the bag. Right, the next couple of videos are going to be demonstrating how to finish your bag. To birth the bag, you want to find the gap in the bottom of your lining and place your hand inside as far as it will go. In hindsight, I probably should have made that maybe 1/2 inch or 1 inch bigger, but it will come through. So you're just going to reach inside and pull your fabric out. It will feel a bit strange. You will feel as though you're going to rip your bag. It does feel very strange, but once you've got the bulk of it through, it will start to come. And if you've given it a back tack there, it will hold nice and secure for you. Okay, now I've actually got my breath back from turning the bag the right way out. You're going to kind of push it all out, and you'll want to kind of maybe get yourself a blunt pair of tweezers, or I've got this kind of boning that I used to use for paper crafting, just to kind of give your box corners a bit more of a shape and a dimension for your external fabric. So I'm just going to carry on pushing that through to give it its nice box corner. Just give it a bit of a turn with my fingers. There we go. Your lining panels, the gap that you left, they're going to tuck the raw edges down inside. Now you can either close that raw edge with a hand stitch, a ladder stitch, or a whipping stitch, or you can use your sewing machine and give yourself an 1/8 of an inch line just along there to sew it closed. So for all intents and purposes, we'll imagine that is closed. And as you can see, once you've tucked your corners in, you've currently got a soft bag that is quite roomy inside. So to create this casing for your wireframe, so again, I'm using the Emmeline Bags frame that I've been specially designed and made for the retreat bag. This is size A. It's the smaller of the 2 bags that I'm making today. So the wireframe, once you take it out of the packaging, is actually going to run along the inside of this bag. So to be able to do that, you're going to create 2 lines of continuous top stitching. Your first top stitching is probably about 1/8 of an inch or away from that seam line, and that stitching is going to continue all the way around the bag, making sure that the zip's pulled out the way, all the way around, and that'll be the first line of your stitching. The second line of your stitching, I like to kind of sew at, forget a ruler so you can see, is 3/8. So I think the pattern recommends a smaller channel than that, but for those that got arthritis or dexterity in the fingers, you may find you struggle putting the wireframe through at such a small channel. So I tend to do it at 3/8, which is just about there. So you can either do one or two things. You can either, if you know on your machine where the 3/8 are, that's great. If you'd like to kind of a line to follow, this is a water soluble pen, so once it becomes damp it will vanish, but do test on a piece of fabric beforehand, because some pens, I've been told, can come back over a period of time. You may see the lines. So I'm just going to do the odd mark every so often at that 3/8 mark away from the channel stitching, and I'll continue going round the bag. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now and create both of those 2 top stitchings as I've mentioned. For this part of the video demonstration, I'm going to show you how to insert the wireframe. But just to recap, you have sewn one stitch line about 1/8 of an inch away from your zipper sort of seam. That created your first line of channel. The second line of stitchings is 5/8 of the way. I don't know why I said 3/8 on the other video. You'd end up with a very tiny channel. So it's about, it's almost like a thumb's width. If I can show you with the wire frame, it's a good channel, good amount of space to take into account the fleece and the interlining, because it will be tricky in some parts for it to go through. So how do we insert this wire frame? Well, you want to get a seam ripper. I know those dreaded words. And you're going to open up in between those 2 stitches lengths. You're not going to want to rip past those, so you might want to place a pin in either side just to kind of stop yourself from going too far. But you just want to undo a couple of those stitches just to create a channel. As you can see, other end would be better for us to insert the wire frame. Before you insert the wire frame, if the ends of these rubber stoppers are loose, I would suggest kind of gluing them in. Just a bit of super glue down the centre of that, and then in it goes again. It'll just stop it from coming off if you need to pull it out to reposition. So it's simple as you take one of your wire frames and you start to kind of push it through that hole all the way through to the other end. And as you get to that end, you should then be able to just tuck that one back inside. And that's your first of your wire frames tucked in. It's the same again for the other side, except this time the fabric's facing the wrong way. So I just want to tuck that fabric to face the other way so I can get the channel going. I'll just pause it there while I get that fabric turned under. So what I did was I've tucked that piece of fabric that way to enclose that wire frame, and to get the other wire frame I just wanted to move that excess piece of fabric to this side so that I could then insert the other wire frame along the other side. And it's just a case of keeping going so it goes to the end, and these should about butt up, and then eventually you just want to give it a bit of a tweak, a bit of a pull. If you find it's not matching, it might be because your seam has got a bit bulky. You just need to kind of keep manipulating it and moving it until that wire frame is tucked inside. Okay, I've managed to get both those wire frames now hidden within the bag in that channel that we've created. Initially you will find that the bag will need some help when closing until the fabrics become a bit softer. So as you can see, it's giving it a nice boxed look, and when you open it, it naturally flips open, giving you a good access to a roomy interior. I really do think this is a wonderful pattern by Emily, and it's a great one if you're new to bag making, but it's also one if you're an experienced bag maker. You can completely adapt this into making it into a bag. You can create yourself a leatherette bottom, make yourself leatherette or leather tabs. It really is customizable with the 2 frames, the size A for this one for the small one, and size B for the larger one. We at the Craft Shed, we do sell both of those frames, A and B, and we tend to use the size frame B for a wireframe bags. So yes, so stay tuned because we will have more videos in the future, and I hope you've enjoyed this so long. Please feel free to get in touch, ask any questions, or if you're stuck along the way, I really would love to hear from you.